We have a couple quarterbacks here, Dan, that sub 5% roster rate on CBS, and I think a pretty decent chance that they're going to start games either this week or in the very near future. Bailey Zappe is 3% rostered. Joe Flacco is 1% rostered. You're in a deep Dynasty Superflex league. Which of these guys would you rather add?
Joe Flacco, without a doubt. And that doesn't even mean I'm excited about Joe Flacco. It just shows my level of disdain for watching. I just watched Bailey Zappe on tape last week against the Giants. That was one of the worst quarterback performances I've ever seen. The first 6 throws he made were all behind the line of scrimmage, except for 2, which were 1 and 3 air yards. Then he tried a 10-yard comeback, and the ball died at the receiver's feet. He does not have NFL-level arm talent whatsoever, Bailey Zappe, and they don't trust him to throw. So for a fantasy standpoint, he doesn't run. He doesn't have an arm. I don't see how he can ever be worth starting in fantasy. So he's completely ruled out for me. Joe Flacco, that one's interesting, Heath, because even last year when he played, the dude was like throwing 300 yards. I know it was like on 70,000 attempts or whatever it was.
He won't get 70,000 attempts playing for the Browns.
Right, and he won't get those attempts playing for the Browns. But slight edge for Joe Flacco, but no real excitement over either.
Yeah, I've got a little bit more excitement for Flacco. Mostly what I'd really like to see on Wild Card Weekend is Joe Flacco at Baltimore and Gardner Minshew at Jacksonville. That would be a fantastic Saturday afternoon. Maybe neither one of those games is getting to Sunday. Let's go to running back, because there is a guy that you were excited about this summer. I think if anybody listened to you and picked him up, they probably dropped him during the first 2 months of the season when he barely saw the field. But D'Ernest Johnson, the last couple of weeks, has looked really good. I feel pretty confident that if something happens to Travis Etienne, D'Ernest Johnson's going to see maybe 15 touches per game. He's 4% rostered. Is that somebody who you'd like to have on your bench? And is it only if you have Etienne, or would you just like to have him on the bench anyway?
No, I'd like to have him on the bench anyway. And I think you did a great job breaking down, Heath, that he's one of the few situations we have where if there was an injury to that top guy, he does, in my opinion, profile to have a lot of touches. And you could see it just in the way they've used him and versus the way they've used Tank Bigsby as the season's gone on. And as you mentioned, Heath, he looks good. He passes the eye test. When you watch him, he creates yards after contact. He creates forced missed tackles. He's an explosive runner. He really has been his entire career. And he offers you something in the passing game as well. I just think D'Ernest Johnson is the type of talent that's worth rostering in Dynasty, regardless of the situation. And this isn't the worst situation, by the way. Like you said, I mean, Travis Etienne has an injury history, has foot issues that have plagued him in the past. He's been healthy this year, but he had at least one scare that he came right back into the game from. But it's worth rostering, in my opinion.
We have a handful of wide receivers who are rostered in less than 10% of league. I know one of them you'll be excited to talk about because he's a giant. But I think all 5 of them have the potential to help this week, especially with 6 teams on a bye. And a couple of them could maybe even be their team's number 1 wide receiver. So I'm going to give you all 5 of the wide receivers rostered in less than 10% of the league. First, you can rank them, and then tell me if you actually care about any of these guys, and we'll spend some time on the giant. Justin Watson is 9% rostered. He scored touchdowns in back-to-back games, looks to be the number 2 wide receiver, number 3 option maybe in the passing game there in Kansas City. Isaiah Hodgins, 6% rostered. Devontae Parker, 5% rostered. He came back from his injury, and guess what happened in the same game? Demario Douglas got hurt. I think Devontae Parker, if Douglas doesn't get back, is the number 1 for the Patriots this week. Jalen Guyton, 4% rostered, the number 2 behind only Keenan Allen. Of course, Keenan Allen gets half the targets, so it might not matter. And then A.T. Perry, 4% rostered, completely disappeared last week, despite the fact that everybody else got hurt. But still, he's 4% rostered, and he was a guy, I think it was Gibbs, maybe you also that really liked this summer.
Just Gibbs. I'm
not just Gibbs.
So Gibbs liked his analytics. I didn't like his tape, but yeah.
Okay, so we've got Watson, Hodgins, Parker, Guyton, Perry. Let's just talk for this year now, and then we'll talk for beyond next.
For this year, it's without a doubt for me in a tier of his own among those guys, Watson. And the reason I say that is because he's the only one who's playing regularly, in my opinion, or will be playing regularly.
Right.
The Chiefs just love this guy. They just put him out there. They love this guy. He's been playing snap for a long time, Heath. I remember last year making arguments to some of my Giants fans who are pro Daniel Jones, and they were like, Daniel Jones has no weapon. I'm like, Justin Watson and MVS are running like 90% of the routes for the Chiefs. How are we going to talk about weapons here? All right. I mean, but you know what? Justin Watson seems to continue to work for them. They like him as a blocker. They like I assume, I don't really know. I don't follow the Chiefs well enough to know that, but that's my assumption. He's a bigger guy. And he does a decent job, I think, of like finding the soft spot in the zone and understanding zone coverage, which is against the Chiefs all the time.
As odd as this sounds, Justin Watson does a better job of getting open than any other wide receiver on this team. And it's ridiculous.
Somehow.
Now, the problem is he can't catch. But he does. And he has the trust. And I had this tweet, I think, late in the Chiefs game when Rashee Rice actually saw a target down the left sideline and he was completely covered. And I added Jacob Gibbs, and I think Rashee Rice finally earned his trust badge, because Justin Watson had that trust from Mahomes and from Andy Reid. And Rice, despite what he'd done so well, did not at all. And I think Rice has
mentioned that, Heath, because that's literally, and I saw he was on the show, the show plan. It's literally what I discussed yesterday on FFT, the box beyond the box score, and I was going to talk about today. Yeah. That was the stop and go route, back shoulder throw to Rashee Rice. That shows an incredible level of trust in the receiver, and it shows a big time report. To me, that's the aha moment for Mahomes and Rice. This is as I discussed it on the show, I'm very big high on Rice rest of season, and at this point in Dynasty as well. And that to me was a big moment because we hadn't seen that.
I do think that Devontae Parker could matter down the stretch. We've seen him have these weird games where I don't know how long. Like I think the problem is they would love to bench Mac Jones, and they'll probably end up starting Bailey Zappe at some point. But as putrid as Mac Jones has been, he's a much better quarterback than Bailey Zappe is.
Somehow, some way.
Yes. Bailey Zappe is worse at almost everything than Mac Jones. So 5 targets for Parker in this game. And that was a game where Demario Douglas saw 9 targets before he left. So if there's no Douglas, and we don't know, Douglas says he's not in a concussion protocol. I thought that was an illegal hit and there should be a fine or a suspension on that play. But it was a Giant, so Dan probably disagrees. I think Parker's maybe looking at 7 to 9 targets in their next game if Douglas is out.
I want to be as excited, or I want to agree with you on that, Heath, but watching that offense, I don't see I just don't see targets coming in general. I don't see much of a forward passing attack, unless if Mac Jones plays, there's more of a forward passing attack.
Right. So let's talk about these 5 again now beyond this year. A.T. Perry, I think, has to be at the top. Do you care about anybody else, or is Isaiah Hodgins the top for you still?
I did like Hodgins a lot coming into this year, but that quarterback situation remains murky, and he just doesn't get enough snaps on the field. So I wouldn't put him there. I don't really want to put A.T. Perry there either, though. I just didn't like his tape at all at the collegiate level. And it wasn't like it was bad tape. He was productive. It was just like he won in ways against ACC.
Parker's too old. We're not going to believe that Watson's going to matter next year. The Chiefs wouldn't do that.
Perry makes the most sense of that group just based on the age.
Unless you want to buy into Jalen Guyton, but I think the Chargers probably have other options as well. So we've got one tight end on the list, and I'm actually cheating. He's above 10% rostered, but it's only 14%. So he's still widely available. Juwan Johnson, another guy who might see 7 to 9 targets this week because the Saints don't have any healthy wide receivers, just 14% rostered. He's actually currently right now projecting Chris Olave out, projecting Rashid Shaheed out, projecting Michael Thomas. He's on IR, so he's not playing. I actually have Juwan Johnson projected as a top 12 tight end this week.
Okay. I like that. I think that's a good rank there. I think Juwan Johnson's been good when he's been on the field, just a matter of finding a way into targets. And this feels like the situation that could find himself a way into targets. So I'm on board with that.